to such an extreme for. I am the Prophet of Allah, I marry. I am the Prophet of Allah, I eat, I sleep. I am the Prophet of Allah, I mix and integrate with society. So if you want to be in my footsteps, you should also strike a balance and be able to do all those as well. So, khair. Let's move on. As I said, we've got less time and I want to go through this as quickly as possible and then pray the Salah of Isha as well. I'm going to ask a quick question to the brothers. Our sisters can discuss them amongst themselves. Where do you think we left off last week? Do you remember? I'm sure, mashallah, you brothers have, I'm not sure the sisters, I can't speak for the sisters, but you brothers have photographic memory. So you don't need to write any notes or anything, mashallah. I have to sit with all the paper around me to make sure I give you the correct information from the classical Islamic books. So mashallah, you brothers got, photographic memory. So remind me, does anybody remember where we were? No? Okay. We were talking about the 6 things about which has an effect through zina. If you recall, just remind everybody, the Prophet ﷺ said, "O Muslims, beware of adultery, of zina. For indeed it has 6." You got me scared there. It has indeed 6 evil consequences. 3 in this world and 3 in the hereafter. And what are they? Number 1, the loss of radiance from a person's face. When a Muslim worships Allah, the natural spiritual enhancement and enlightenment has an effect on a person's face. But when a person commits fornication, has a relationship outside of marriage, or in marriage with another woman who is impermissible for, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the light from their hearts away from them, and hence their faces become dark. What happens when they go in the company of the pious, in the company of the elderly, who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just them looking at them can tell that this person surely is away from the mercy of Allah. Number 2 is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reduces the lifespan of those people who are involved in illicit relationships. Number 3, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes them experience poverty. So you may earn so much, but it won't be enough. Or you might get a qualification, but the difficulty of finding a job. Or finding jobs, going for interviews and not getting accepted. One of the results for this is because when people are involved in sin, and more importantly involved in zina, in fornication, Allah deprives them. And one of the 3 things that follow a person after the person passes away is the wrath and the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2, they have a damned reckoning. They'll be, when they stand in front of Allah, the shivering will be of such a nature, will disable their knees. In other words, it will be very damned reckoning. And thirdly, the punishment of the fire of Jahannam, the fire of hell. And I finished off by explaining about the 2 things the Prophet ﷺ said, that whoever can guarantee me those 2 things, I guarantee them Jannah. What were they?
The tongue.
The tongue and the
private parts.
The private parts. So, it's okay. So as I say, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever can guarantee me 2 things, the preservation, the security of 2 things, I, Muhammad ﷺ, give them Jannah, guarantee them Jannah. And what are they? The private part of the tongue. And then in another hadith, we know the Prophet ﷺ said that surely marriage is half of your faith. And many of us think, alhamdulillah, marry, and that's it, I've completed half of my faith, forget everything else, that hopefully will make me into paradise. You won't. What is the other half? The tongue. So you control your tongue, you control your private parts, inshallah, and of course, that's including your fara'id, your prayers, your 5 daily prayers, inshallah you will go into Jannah. Let's move on. There are conditions of marriage. The scholars write there are approximately about 4 conditions for a person to marry, men or women. Number 1 is obligatory, farad. And I'll mention when it becomes obligatory. When a person experiences, man or woman, when they experience these natures or these conditions, then that person should make arrangements as soon as possible to marry. And what are they? If a person firstly possesses the means, you have the wealth. If you're skint, then it'll be difficult. You don't want to get married and, for the brothers or the sisters, especially the brothers, because they have a bigger responsibility when it comes to maintenance of the home, paying the bills, you have a religious responsibility. So maintenance or means is very, very important. So when you have the means, as well as you have the carnal urge. Now, the reason I mention this is that there are many people who don't have the carnal urge. They may be impotent, or there could be other reasons for that. So it's important. So you have the wealth, you have the carnal urge, and the third thing is that person who has the wealth and who has the shahwa, the carnal urge, they fear that if they don't get married, they'll fall into sin. They'll be involved in an illicit relationship. They'll be involved in breaking families apart by being involved in an illicit relationship. When you have those three things within you, then it is very, very important that you make arrangements to marry. We find brothers, sisters alike, that reach the age of 35, 40, 45, and they don't marry. So these conditions are upon them. You know, in the rise of rape and adultery, why is it happening? Because we have all these conditions, but of course with the other factors as well, which we will go through later on, the tradition, the culture that surrounds some of our Muslim communities. But if you have those three things, you have the means, you have the carnal desire, and we worry that I have as much carnal desire that I may be involved in sin, then you must marry. Can I have the people that are sitting on this side as well, please? Jazakallah for that. I was just talking about the conditions. You've not much to miss. I'll recap what we did last week, 2 weeks ago, and what conditions are there for a person to marry. The first condition is when you have the means, it's obligatory, you have the means, you have the carnal desire, and you worry that you may be involved in sin, in an illicit relationship, then it is further for you to marry. You should convince your parents, convince your guardians that, look, if you don't get me married, you will be answerable. If you don't have guardians, then for you to find an appropriate partner and to get the nikah done, to get yourself married. So number one. Number two is wajib, necessary. It is not as important as the first one, but it's necessary. And when is this? Now, when you have the first two things, you have the wealth and you have the carnal desire. You don't have the worry of falling into sin. But if you have wealth and you have the carnal desire, and this condition is the majority. Majority will have, when they have the wealth and when they have the carnal desire, then you should marry. You shouldn't waste time. Number three is sunnah. That a person has the wealth, but they don't necessarily have that much of it. They have an urge, but not much of a carnal urge. Then you can delay it, take your time, and you can marry. But you should try your best not to do that. But rather, it's advised, it's sunnah, that if you have the wealth and you have the urge, you should marry as quickly as possible. And in this day and age, it's even more important. You shouldn't delay it. We tend to delay it. Let's get our degree and let's get our let's get a job. And when you get a job, let's get on the career ladder first. And let's do this, let's do that. And we delay it. And what happens? We reach men and women alike. And we reach the age where, for men who's going through an arranged marriage, they can't find an appropriate lady. For the ladies who are looking for an appropriate man, they can't find an appropriate man. And it gets delayed. So we shouldn't delay it too much. Number four is impermissible. At times it becomes haram to marry. When a person does not have any carnal desire at all. In other words, a person is impotent. Sadly, we find in Muslim communities that a child is going through some medical condition for which, whatever that medical condition is, which they, especially specifically amongst men, who are going through impotency, but because to keep up the name and the fame in the community, to keep up the name in the family, the child gets married. It is a oppression upon the woman. And what happens? I've come across many cases myself that families are fighting and arguing within the first 2 months of marriage, and the case comes to the Imaam, and you try to understand what is the situation. Natural instinct where a woman feels uncomfortable to be able to mention the situation, because she may tell one of her close friends, a member of the family, but we shouldn't feel embarrassed because we need to be able to make it clear. And it's a sad situation where the family were aware. The man was aware that they're impotent, but still they go through the procedure of marriage to keep the name and fame rise in the community. It's dangerous, it's haram, it's impermissible, and we should be very, very careful. If a man is experiencing any nature of impotency, then we should immediately seek medical assistance, medical help. If a man, a child whose parents are trying to get them married, or a man who himself is wanting to get married, if we are medically not in a good stance, we should never ever take a step and make somebody else's life hell. But rather, we should try to get ourselves treated and thereafter look for marriage. Okay, let's move on. Is that okay? So the four things. Obligatory, I'm sure you guys know, we should have an exam, shouldn't we? I think we should have an exam, so people will remember what we've been taught. So obligatory, wajib, necessary, sunnah, and thereafter impermissible and haram. Let's move on. Some other aspects which people go through. Nowadays, people don't marry, they leave it till so late for whatever reason, and they go through these haram positions. First of all, homosexuality. Homosexuality, clear-cut is haram in the Quran. Homosexuality is clear-cut in the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we as Muslims need to make it clear, we're not being homophobic, or even if you call it homophobic, we don't hate. If there's a Muslim who's homosexual, the Prophet ﷺ has taught us that we shouldn't hate that person. We should hate the action of that person. So if there's a person called Abdullah who's homosexual, we shouldn't ban him and shun him away from the community and think him to be bad. No, we should say that this action is bad. What does the Quran say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلُوطًا إِذَا قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَأْتُونَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مَا سَبَقَكُمْ بِهَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ إِنَّكُمْ تَأْتُونَ الرِّجَالَ شَهْوَةً مِنْ دُونِ النِّسَاءِ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَطَرًا فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُجْرِمِينَ. Allah reminds the Muslims. Allah reveals this ayah of the Quran to the Prophet, that, O Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a metaphorical translation, not exact word by word, but Allah reminds Lut alayhi salam, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, about the nation of Lut alayhi salam a lot, according to the biblical terms. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there was a community where men would approach men to fulfill and gratify themselves sexually. And then Lut alayhi salam would say to them, but what are you doing? This is incorrect. When angels came to Lut alayhi salam as visitors, Allah sent them in such a way they were looking like very beautiful young men. And when they came to the house of Lut alayhi salam, before they came to the house of Lut, they met Ibrahim alayhi salam. And they said to Ibrahim alayhi salam, because Lut alayhi salam was a nephew of Ibrahim. And they said to Ibrahim alayhi salam, they came first to meet Ibrahim and to give him glad tidings of a son. And then they told Ibrahim alayhi salam that they're going to destroy a nation. They said, which nation are you going to destroy? And he said, I'm going to destroy the nation of Lut alayhi salam. So these angels later on came to meet Lut alayhi salam. Not necessarily these two angels, later angels that came to demolish the people of Lut. But two angels before that, and some narrations at that time, came to meet Lut alayhi salam. What happened? They were, mashallah, beautiful looking young men. And the whole community came. Men came, knocking, banging on the door of Lut alayhi salam, that give us your men, give us those young men. And Lut alayhi salam said, fear Allah. This is haram, impermissible. Allah has given you women. You men and women marry amongst yourselves. And then, yet again, they wouldn't listen to Lut alayhi salam. And then Lut alayhi salatu wasalam, obviously these young men went away. Then Lut alayhi salam explained to them such and said to them, why do you come to men? Why do men come to men and women come to women? But rather Allah has made it natural for a man to come to a woman and for a woman to go to a man, not in the same sexes. Hence, these people didn't understand, they didn't listen. Allah says, وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَطَرًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the heavens pelted them with stones. Harun Yahya and others who've written on Islamic history, and others as well, have written that, such was the pelting. The Quran says, in another part, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibra'il alayhi salam. Jibra'il alayhi salatu wa salam raised this community, who are homosexual community, of Lut alayhi salam, turned them over. So how did he raise them? Jibra'il alayhi salam has many wings. He opened one of his wings, which, when he would open, it would cover the entire east. He opened one of his wings, and from the corner of one of his wings, he raised this homosexual community, and he raised it to the heavens. The narration says that the angels in the heavens could hear the people talking in the land. So in other words, they raised it so high that he touched it towards the heavens, and then he turned them over. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that with a sudden bang, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam threw them down from the heaven, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the entire nation. It wasn't finished there. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rained upon them stones. The reason Allah did this, well, there was no need to do that, to show the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why would Allah destroy a community and Allah throw stones at them? Because to reiterate the point that this is unnatural, it is away from the teaching of Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Scientists say the most lowest part of the point of earth is the place where Lut alayhi salatu wasalam's whole people came, which is near Palestine. Some narrations are where the Dead Sea is. Under the Dead Sea is the people of Lut alayhi salam, and hence the water is very salty and so on. What does the Quran teaches people, Muslims especially when they go to that part of the land, they go and have a bit of an amusement, go and check it out. But the Quran teaches the words of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are that we shouldn't go and have a bit of fun there. When we go towards a place where the punishment of Allah came, you'd rush past it. and we pray, alhamdulillah, istighfar, astaghfirullah, and so on, because Allah's punishment came upon them. So clearly, anybody who tries to justify it is away from the teachings of Allah and His noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I reiterate the point. People may quote us to be homophobic. We are not being homophobic, but this is the teachings of Allah and His noble Messenger sallallahu